I'm absolutely delighted to be introducing our speakers today. We have Chris Gooderham, who joined the AHDB Dairy Market Intelligence team as a lead analyst in September last year. Chris has got a wealth of experience, over 20 years of commercial experience with the British dairy market, having started as a market analyst way back in 1995 for Milkmark. Chris has spent the last 15 years in a variety of different roles. One most recently as Business Development Director at First Milk. We also have Mark Topliff here around the table this morning, who's a lead analyst in the AHDB Farm Economics team. He started his career with ADAS as a livestock consultant for 6 years before joining the Meat and Livestock Commission in 2005, and then becoming part of the AHDB team in 2008. His current role involves domestic and international benchmarking and cost of production work for dairy, beef and sheep sectors. And we also have Andrew, who farms up in Derbyshire, and he's moved from an all-year-round calving pattern to a spring calving pattern progressively over the last 4 years. But I'm going to let Andrew tell you his story. So without further delay, Chris, I'm going to hand over the controls to you.
Okay, thank you, Jenny, and good morning. We're going to focus today's webinar on the 2 stories that were published last week looking at calving patterns, and in particular comparing the all-year-round calving with block calving, either spring or autumn. We'll spend a little time to start with looking at the current situation in the country and where we've come from. We'll then look at whether there's an opportunity for us to do things a little differently, and if we did, what the implications might be, both for individual farmers but also for the industry as a whole. As Jenny said, we're going to hear from Andrew, who's in the process of switching from all-year-round to block calving. And finally, we'll run a question and answer session where we'll do our best between us to answer any questions that you've got. So where are we now? As part of the latest Farmer Intention Survey, we asked what system farmers classified themselves as. So these numbers are based on farmers' self-assessment. More than 80% of farmers surveyed currently class themselves as all-year-round calving. And actually, if we look at other sources, including Promar data, the split is about the same. There are just 4% classifying themselves as spring and 8% as autumn. We also asked in the Farmer Intention Survey whether they were looking to change calving patterns, and only 8% said they were. More than half of those were looking to switch to autumn. However, we still have some spring and autumn block calvers planning to move to all year round. We also looked back over the last 6 years, just to be mindful of the chart that's on the screen in front of you, that the scale on the left-hand side starts at 70%. And the other thing just to bear in mind is that between 2013 and 2014, we switched from being UK to GB. But the numbers are still quite interesting. So if we look back over the last 6 years, up until probably 2012, the number of all-year-round herds in the country were increasing. We did see that step up in 2014, but that may well be to do with switching from UK to GB. What we've seen over the last year is we've seen the all-year-round herds shrinking back down slightly, as well as the autumn, and we've seen a growth in spring, and we've also seen a growth in the dual blocks, the autumn plus spring blocks. Before we look at the implications of changing system, I thought it'd be useful to look at how we've ended up here. Why do we have more than 80% on all-year-round calving? Effectively, it's a bit of a combination. Since the war, we've had seasonality incentives in place in the country, trying to encourage farmers to either maintain a flat milk profile or flatten it further. From a milk processor's perspective, they do prefer a flat milk profile because it is more efficient at the processing end. That's not to say it's the most efficient for the whole industry, though. That desire for flat profile has been driven quite a lot by the dominance of the liquid market in the country, which does take around half of our milk. However, some of it has also been driven by farm decisions, either issues getting cows back into calf or limitations on what the farm can handle. The key question for us today is whether all-year-round calving really is the best option for the industry, or should we be looking to move back to more block calving? And if we did, what would be the implications for both farmers and the industry as a whole? I'm now going to hand over to Mark, who's going to look at the implications at farm level.
Thank you, Chris, and good morning, everybody. So I'm just going to, over the next few slides, look at the farm level implications of moving to block calving systems. I've done some analysis using some of the figures that we have in AHDB to look at that. And then what we'll do is we'll have a chat with Andrew Mycock, who's going to give us his practical experience of that switching from all year round to block carving. So firstly, let's look at the farmer implications then and look at it in terms of opportunities and limitations. So starting with the opportunities then, block carving should allow better grades grass utilisation, with the block carving systems being a tight carving system, and obviously the feed requirements are much tighter as well in terms of being able to manage that. Better grade grass utilisation should be possible. Also, obviously, with the system being of more intensive in just a few weeks of the year rather than being all year round, there's possible opportunities for labour saving as well. Of course, with the block carving system, there is that focused seasonal management, and from that, you should be able to get production efficiency, from being able to have that look at your carving system within a small period of time relative to all year round. And generally what we see as well, and we'll see some figures shortly to highlight this, that there are higher margins achievable per litre. However, there are limitations, and we shouldn't forget those. The system, the sort of carving system for autumn or spring systems should have a cow type which suits that system. Fertility is very much a top priority and a key to having a block carving system that works and remains tight. As well, you need to have the sort of suitability of land, and the availability and location should all be suitable to allow that block carving system to work effectively and appropriately, and also in terms of having that longer grazing season as well to be able to make those block carving systems work. Generally, what we've seen in the past is that milk buyers generally don't favour seasonal producers, but also the other limitation is that there needs to be some strip culling and replacements in order to keep that tight carving block. So that's the farmer implications. Just to remind ourselves in terms of what the milk output profile would look like typically, and this is using some actual data that we get in AHDB, and you can see there the seasonality of both the spring and the autumn, as well as the fairly level profile of all year round carving blocks. Now, of course, these profiles will differ from individual to individual farm, but this allows us just to have some sense of that seasonality of production from block carving. And we've used that seasonality to look at what are the economic possibilities in terms of looking at the revenue for milk sales. So here we've looked at those seasonalities and applied the latest contract milk prices using the AHDB milk price calculator. And across the different contract types there, you can see there isn't a significant difference between the revenue that spring calving and autumn calving can receive versus the all year round systems. In fact, there could be some gains to be made even under some of the contracts there, which you may not think they would necessarily gain. So it's worth just saying that when we look at the compositional benefits, the spring calving system under standard manufacturing contracts can actually gain, for example, compared to an all year round system. So let's look at revenue. What about cost of production and net margins? So using data that we've had in AHDB and looking back over the last 5 years, and average the cost of production, the annual cost of production figures for the last 5 years, this is what we see. So typically the sort of cost of production savings of, say, autumn calving system versus your year round one has been over 1 pence per litre, and for spring that's over 2 pence per litre. You translate that into 1 million litres, then you've got savings of 13,000 and 24,000 pounds typically for those block carving systems compared to all year round. So potentially there's some significant savings to be made. As we've seen in the previous slide, we've seen that actually revenue is little different across the different systems. So that also translates into the net margin. So again, if we look back over the last 5 years average, the full economic net margin all year round has had a positive margin, just under 1 pence per litre, autumn just over 2 pence per litre, and spring 3.5 pence per litre. So the full economic margin, just to explain there, includes all costs, so includes a value for unpaid family labour, depreciation, etc. So again, translating that into the extra margin per million litres, we're looking at 13,000 and around about £27,000 for each of those block calving systems typically. So why is that? Well, what we tend to find with the all year round calving farms is they do tend to have higher costs of feed, higher costs of vets, medicine costs, and labour and young stock as well. One thing we shouldn't forget when we're looking at moving to a block calving system is the possible impact on cash flow. Here I'm just outlining some of the main impacts. So when you're going to consider looking at a block calving system, there's two ways of doing that. You can either do it abruptly, so that is when you sell your herd and then bring in a herd of cows which are at the seasonal calving that you're looking to bring in. Or you can do that gradually, where you take your existing herd and you gradually move that over a period of time towards a block calving system. The other thing is just to be aware of is obviously the seasonal revenue, and also if there's any changes that need to be made to the infrastructure of the farm in terms of being able to cope with the peak seasonal production that you'll get either in milk or in terms of even calves, and that also needs to be factored in, and the impact on the cash flow considered as well. So let's just look at the factors to consider then, and just run through them all. One thing which does is considered by many switching to a block calving system is one about lifestyle change. So you do find that there are many farmers who are still profitable even on all year round systems, but actually they find they just want to change their lifestyle, and so a block calving system can allow them to do that. That's something which some consider, and for some people that might not be something that they would want to do, but for many that is a reason for changing. The other thing which we just touched on in the previous slide is about the change and how you're going to change, and that needs to be carefully thought out and planned and budgeted for. As well as that, there's obviously any possible change you need to infrastructure, so again, careful planning to make sure that any of those peak production times are catered for in terms of having the infrastructure on the farm to be able to cope. And in being able to invest in those changes, again, are there capital requirements which are needed to either, if you're bringing in the cows and the heifers to be able to calve at the peak, those calving times, but also then payback of that capital requirement as well. Impact on cash flow, as I touched on the previous slide, again, make sure that is carefully planned and looked at because of the seasonal revenue that you'll get. But one key thing is to make sure that the management of those systems is very good to be able to get the best out of those systems, and obviously to make the most of the opportunity those block calving systems can possibly give. And of course, we shouldn't go without saying the possible impact on milk contracts as well. So those are just a summary of some of the factors to consider at the farm level. Now, who we've got on the line now is Andrew Mycock, who's a farmer in Derbyshire, and who has been moving from a all-year-round system to a block calving system. And we'll just have a chat now with Andrew, so Andrew can share with us his experiences of doing that, and give us some insight into what he found in terms of the challenges, etc. So, good morning, Andrew.
Morning.
Just to start off with, Andrew, just want to tell us a little about yourself and some of the facts about your farm.
Yes, we're farming just over 500 acres at the moment. Just over half of that is rented, milking 350 Holsteins, currently doing 7,500 litres We used to have them, the high yielders used to, when we were all year round calving, the highs were in all the time, and we were doing about 8,500 litres, but using over 3 tonne of concentrates. We've been slowly moving to a paddock grazing system, and as we've put all the cows outside to graze, we've extended the platform and the tracks. Now down to 2 full-time employees. We did have 3 until this spring when one left, but he still comes back and does a bit part-time. We haven't replaced him due to the milk price. We do most of our own field work. We do all the mowing and tedding, and contractors come and pick the silage up and pit it.
And so you had an all-year-round system, and was it unprofitable? I mean, was there something about that system that made you want to change for any particular reason? What was the decision-making behind that?
We were profitable. We've expanded. I mean, over the last 20 years, we've moved from milking about 150 cows up to up to the 350 we're at now. But I looked around and I thought, I was looking at the grazing boys and how they were doing it, and I thought, well, they might be making more money, they might not be, but it seemed they'd be making at least as much as I was, but didn't seem to be having to work as hard to do it. So I thought I might as well try that. We used to be good at grazing when I first started farming 25 years ago, and I thought it was something I needed to get on top of again. So my change to seasonal calving has gone hand in hand with moving to a grass-based grazing system.
And so, what were the steps that you went through, Andrew? I mean, what did you bring in a consultant to help with that? What's the business planning decisions that you went through, and the process you went through to do that?
I joined the grazing discussion group. That would be 4 years ago. 3.5 years ago. I'd already started to change a bit before then, but joining the discussion group has helped my confidence and give me, ideas about how we should execute the move.
And was that something that you did on your own with the help of the group, or did you bring some outside sort of expertise in as well?
No, I didn't bring anybody else in, just the members of the group and our facilitator in the group as well, who's a dairy consultant.
Yeah. So from a practical point of view then, how did you change from one system to the other? You mentioned already that you did it gradually. Was there a particular reason for doing it gradually?
Yeah, we've got a Holstein herd, so I chose to go autumn calving because I didn't think the cow type I'd got was suitable for a spring calving. So the idea is to calve in the autumn and then start feeding them fairly quickly, get them on just to get the yield out of them. Really, I think what we've got is not suitable for a milk-off purely grass system.
We've got your calving pattern on the screen now, Andrew. Do you want to just take us through that then, that change you've made over the last sort of 4 years?
Yes, I mean, this year will be the biggest change because we actually start calving on the 1st of August. I think the 18 animals that calved in July this year are actually all in the last week of July, so really they should have been for August calvers. So what we did, we served the black and white for 4 months, and then the last month was purely beef. So all the replacements will be born over 4 months this year, and we should finish calving at the end of December. We've got about 30 cows that we're going to roll round that we didn't get a chance to serve that calved in the spring. Obviously there won't be any spring calvers next year because we just didn't, we took the sweeper bulls out. So we're going to take a hit on milk production probably next spring or later on end of this year because we'll be a bit short on calvings.
So what did you find was the biggest challenge then for moving to your year-round to your autumn calving system?
I think with Holsteins it's fertility, definitely. Another challenge that we've had recently was we've started testing for Neospora, and we've found that about a third of the cows are Neospora positive, so we only wanted to serve those to the beef bull, which has limited us a little bit, because what we want to do is front load or get all the dairy replacements, born August, September, and there's quite a lot of those cows that we can't serve to the dairy bull. We're having to put the beef bull on, so we've actually gone back to using sex semen on the maiden heifers, which is not something you'd generally recommend on a block calving herd. So that's an ongoing issue we've got at the moment.
Yeah. And what do you find you're sort of being able to sort of get on top of that now?
Not really, because it was only spring last year we realised we got the Neospora problem. We actually looked for it. So I think we're going to be a little bit short of heifers coming through what are being born now. We're normally looking for 90 to 100, and so we've got a few spare, and we normally sell a few heifers. I'd normally sell the tail enders, so that's what I've been doing over the last 4 or 5 years. Anything that's calved in the new year, I've generally sold them. Try and help tighten everything up.
So that's certainly one of your biggest challenges that you come across then in your change. Is there anything that surprised you then? Anything that's surprised you as a challenge, or surprised you in how easy it was even?
It's very easy. Once we turn out, we'll try and start turning out in March, depending on the weather. We're what I call an opportunistic grazer. We're 1,000 foot above sea level. We have 45 inches of rain a year, so you take your chances to graze when you can. But we start turning them out as soon as we can. But once they're all out, it's very easy. It's just turn them out on the paddock, back in, milk them, no services to do, no drying offs. So it's really good chance in the May, June, July to get people away on holiday.
And you mentioned you wanted to get back to having that more focused grassland management, which you had a few years ago. So what are you doing now to help with that grassland management and keep that focused for your autumn calving?
Yeah, well, we've put parlour feeders in. We used to just be TMR feeding, so when we were grazing, they'd graze and then go through a segregation gate, so those that had concentrates went in the shed, had some concentrates after milking, so it was all or nothing really. So now we've got individual parlour feeders, so we can tailor what concentrates we get, so that we do no buffer feeding now in the summer. Once they're fully out, sort of middle to late April, we'll stop buffer feeding, and then it's just grazed grass and concentrates in the parlour. So yeah, we buffer feed. We stop buffer feeding in April, and we just use parlour concentrates now and grazed grass, and that's just so much simpler, and they also make a better job of grazing the grass if you don't buffer feed them.
Yeah. Have you managed to extend your grazing season then from what you've done?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're starting earlier. I mean, it's not so much I suppose part of it is the seasonal calving, but when we had spring calving cows, we found it very difficult to graze those because they're peaking at over 40 litres, and we really struggle to get enough dry matter into them, especially if you want to get them back in calf again. So now we've all got this, they've all passed peak, sort of 120 days plus carbs, so it's much easier to graze those cows and get a sensible performance out of them off just grass and cake.
Okay. We've got some pictures that you provided for us, Andrew. Do you want to just take us through these two pictures we've got for you? So first is a picture of calf igloos. So do you want to talk around that in relation to what you've done?
Yeah, so we've calved nearly 120 cows in August, so it does put some pressure on calving facilities. So we had some igloos before, we bought some more, so now we've got 10 individual igloos, which will start all the heifer calves in. So we keep some of the beef heifer calves as well, so they're in there for about 4 or 5 days until we've got a group up, and then we go into the bigger igloos you can see in the background, where they're in groups of 5. They're all on teat feeders. Yeah, so we've got a new shed here which we built. Really, we needed this one because of the move to block calving, so we still calve inside with another building similar size to this for calving in. This one's 5 15-foot bays, and then it's 45 foot wide, so there's 30 foot of straw, 15 foot of concrete, and it's split into each bay is an individual pen, so we have 5 different pens there, and we put 10 calves in each pen and feed them with the teat feeders in there. But before the calves go in, we'll use it as a extra calving pen, and then as we start calving and as the igloos fill up, we'll start sectioning some of the shed off. So we started with just 1 bay taken out and so on, and just move up. So in that photo there's 2 pens of calves, 2 pens of dry cows, and then another pen for as calved cows. So that's given us a lot of flexibility, that building. But I mean, it did cost about 25 grand to put up by the time you put all the fence, all the gates and stuff in it, and the floor. So it's, it's substantial investment, but it's, it's going to last me a long while, and it's made the job a lot easier.
And just to finish then, do you see you're still just going through the process and converting to the autumn calving system, but do you see then yourself being more profitable than you were before, or about the same? What do you?
We're definitely more profitable, but we've changed to a more grass-based system. So we've cut. In the last 2 years, we've cut feed use by 700 kilos a cow, and the production stayed the same. So obviously, that's had a big impact on profit. Yeah.
That's great. So what we'll do, we'll end it there, Andrew. We'll no doubt have some questions at the end of the presentations. What I'll do now, I'll move on to Chris and his industry implications. Thanks for that, Andrew.
Okay, so just moving on quickly to the industry implications. In the same way we looked at the opportunities and limitations for farmers, we're going to do the same for the industry as a whole. So in terms of opportunities, the information we have does suggest that the compositional quality is higher from the block calving systems compared to all year round, although that may well be due to the breed of cow being milked. Mark has already talked us through the financial opportunities on farm, which we've captured here as a supply chain efficiency, but that does really rely on us being able to ensure we're not adding costs in further down the supply chain, and we'll touch on that in a little while when we talk about buddy systems. In terms of limitations, I'm going to look at some of the processing capacity challenges, but also touch on the bull calf market, given that was a question we got asked last week when the articles were published. So in terms of capacity constraints, a few weeks ago we did an article looking at whether the UK could cope with the Irish milk profile. In other words, if the majority of farmers in the UK became spring block calvers, could we cope? The simple answer is no. We've got a requirement in the UK for the liquid milk market, so we need a relatively flat profile for at least 50% of the milk volume. We also know that the UK only just copes with the spring peak as it is, so a higher peak caused by a predominantly spring calving herd would need significant investment just to cope with the extra capacity required for that short period of time. So put simply, at the moment, the UK couldn't cope with just a spring block calving system, and we need to think a little differently. We'll come back to that shortly. One question we were asked after the articles went out was what the impact would be on calf prices. We can see historically, the chart shows the 5-year averages. We can see that the calves sold in the spring have tended to sell for about £20 to £25 a head, lower than the average for the year. The autumn calf prices, again, slightly below the average, but probably not so far below as the spring ones are. So obviously, if everyone moved to spring and autumn and did nothing different, we'd see a dramatic shift in the number of animals coming to the market at those 2 times of the year, and this would likely push the prices down. However, we know that the Republic of Ireland are predominantly spring calving, and yet they have a relatively stable flow of calves coming to market, and that's achieved by varying the finishing time. So rather than simply taking calves to market when they reach a certain age. So it seems that the block calving system could bring us some challenges from a bull calf perspective. But if we look at what other countries do, those challenges don't look unsurmountable. We talked about the opportunity to combine spring and autumn calvings in the articles as well. And we looked at farmers who are currently running those spring and autumn calving systems and what milk volumes they would generate if we put their milk together. The results were perhaps surprising. We found that if we put one spring and one autumn herd together, the profile of milk was similar to that obtained from an all-year-round herd. We also found that we could get even closer to the current flat profile by combining 2 autumn herds with 1 spring herd. So our conclusion was that the UK industry does need to maintain a flattish milk production profile overall, but actually we can still achieve this even with block calving, provided that we manage the number of farmers on spring calving with a number on autumn calving. If we use the numbers Mark talked about earlier, that will still give us a large potential saving that is worth considering. This leads on to the question for milk buyers, really. As well as asking farmers to just look at their own system and ask the question, we ask milk buyers to do the same with their seasonality schemes. We have a variety of schemes in place in the country, but all of them are based on the milk production coming from an individual farm. Is there another way? Should milk buyers be looking to buddy up 2 or more farms and develop systems around that? So just in summary, first of all, we should make one thing very clear. We're not sitting here saying that every farm in the country needs to switch from what they're currently doing to operate either spring or autumn block calving. Those decisions will be highly individual, and farmers need to make those choices based on their own positions. However, what we are saying is that the benefits to individual farmers look good enough that farmers should at least consider the question. We're also saying that from a milk buyer perspective, the challenges of block calving are not unsurmountable. Processors should be able to maintain relatively flat overall milk supply, provided the change to block calvings is managed. There seems to be some big prizes available. They're not necessarily easy to obtain, but they are at least worth considering. Thank you.